And we're back. Welcome to Print Your Games, the podcast of all about what's new and awesome in 3D printing for gamers. I'm your host, Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Param, and I'm joined by...
Kristen and Sowards, also known as Lost Spheres.
And for those of you who missed us last week, I am sorry. In a bit of method acting, I caught the plague. And I was feeling every bit as zombie as this horde that I've been printing this week. I have no idea what this bug was. I do know it was not COVID. I did get tested because it felt COVID bad, but it wasn't. And a lot of my friends and my current family members have it still. But I am recovering. I am not 100%. So if you see me mute the mic and cough a bunch, that'll be edited out of the audio version, obviously. But so my apologies in advance. And for those of you us joining us, I super appreciate it. Do get questions and get chatty in the chat. We do love to talk with you all during the episode. And oh boy, today our episode topic will be about getting our miniatures painted and some easy ways and resources to do that. In some ways, you might not even have to do that. I've got some fun stuff to talk about. But up in the meantime, what about you, Kristen? What have you been doing?
I have been plunging through a little bit of chaos, both in my personal life, but also on my printer. I've been busting out. I guess I would be most likely to use them as Havoc Brothers of War, maybe in like OPR or
yes.
they probably
join me in the skirmish world.
But they will also double for the Black Blades in my own City of Seven Serfs campaign setting thing. So they're multi-use for me, but yeah, that's where I've been at, and it's apropos because all the crazy stuff going on outside of that has cut into my painting time, my printing time, everything. But because of the things we're going to be talking about today, I actually still got a very satisfying amount of stuff done, which was so good.
And that is going to be the theme of tonight's episode. I am not going to talk much about miniature painting as an art form and competing for those golden demons. Me and Christian are here to chat about getting minis painted quickly and well.
When it comes to most gaming things, I'm a filthy casual, and that definitely applies to painting.
Right. And not unfortunately, I actually super enjoy miniature painting. It's like it's been one of my hobbies for the past 20 years. In fact, I have the first miniature I've ever painted ever is this little wizard from Reaper.
I believe my first mini painted ever was pewter or lead, and it was mostly just a green smear, and it has rattled around in a box to the point where it is unrecognizable, but it's like a chipped metal lump.
Right. Yes. And oh yeah, and those old minis were all metal, and don't eat them, and
don't touch them, don't lick your fingers.
Those early paints were enamels meant for painting toy cars, and just a bottle of testers and some alcohol, and you get this stuff done. And believe it or not, I was emulating that look because I had proper Citadel acrylic paints when I painted this little dude, but I wanted that testers enamel look, so I put Ard coat all over it to get that shiny candy finish on that cloak. Oh boy, I still love Ard coat. I still keep a couple of pots of old Ard coat that I'm never going to give up because every so often I want my dwarf shiny.
Well, you'd still do some model stuff too, where it's much more appropriate. You slap some shine on a Gundam or something, and it looks right.
So the painting miniatures and painting buildings and stuff is going to be part of the hobby for us 3D printing gamers, because with few exceptions, most printers cannot print full color miniatures.
Nope.
Your Saturns, your Harlots, they can't do it. Anycubic has yet to throw out a photon RGB out there, and I bet the first time we get a photon RGB is because it's AB April Fool's joke, where they've just like strapped it with gamer LED so that the case itself glows like all the 16 million colors, but it still prints gray minis.
I could see it.
Yeah. Did you see the who was it? Was it Anycubic that did the Anycubic 2D printer this year? It was just a laserjet printer.
I did not. Honestly, I usually stick my head in the sand on April Fools. I am not a fan, so I did not see that.
Yeah. So I said most printers, but there is hope for the future, Kristen. There are printers that can do full color miniatures, and they get better and better every year. In fact,
How
I've looked up one like if you order miniatures from like say Hero Forge, and there's like some rumors and stuff showing up on my mini factory of being able to order full color prints from some of the artists that we're familiar with printing ourselves. That's going to be an exciting option.
that's
And
crazy. How much does something like that run?
so I found the cheapest one I could find that does high quality 3D printed resin is the Mimikey 3D UJ 2207. I'm going to go ahead and throw that up on screen,
Am
which
I
is an
hearing quotes
industrial.
around that cheapest bit?
This is still the cheapest
All right.
at 39,000 US dollars.
Holy Hannah. No.
And a build size of 203 by 203 by 76. Technically, the Mars has a wider build plate in some instances than this thing has. And how it works is actually it can handle multiple different types of resin at once. These printers do. So, like, if you can look up top on the printers, you will see that there is like an array of bottles up there plugged into it. And it just takes the different colors and mixes them together as it prints to get the different colors across the mini. And it's actually surprisingly good. Hero Forge, I said, uses this technology. And you remember they did that big Kickstarter where they were doing 3D colored printed miniatures, and those looked real good. And they've actually done a 2.0 release in No Direction. Alex Agunas did a whole video on those, and those look even brighter. Like those first versions kind of looked washed out. And then the new ones don't look washed out. They're very bright and colorful and cheerful. I haven't seen too many of them on the darker side of painting, but it's impressive tech. And for 40,000 US dollars and the shipping cost from Japan and professional installation, your industrial complex can have one of these printers available too. But like all technology, this was all 3D printers. I do think that it will not be like too terribly far in the distant future before technology like this starts to show up in like home hobbyist level acquirement.
I think that's going to be a little bit distant away. For anybody who's watching, here's my really bad focus job on one of the Hero Lab. I believe we said it was a Gen 1.
Yeah.
She's a little faded, but really cool. And a lot better than I could do casually. I mean, if I took my time, I could beat that, but time isn't something I always have.
So until we do that, we've got to paint these ourselves. We've got to just put acrylic paints on the brush and get them on the mini. And there are lots of ways of doing that, and a lot of way of doing it faster, and some new ways that have come out the last couple of years with, like, say, the contrast paint method. Later on this episode, me and Christian both spent a considerable amount of time playing with the Army Painter's new speed paint line, and we think that is a great option for people getting into miniature painting for the first time to get some stuff cranked out in a hurry that's going to look great. And there's just a lot of options available for getting your models and getting them painted and looking nice on the tabletop without it being should not be intimidating. But in fact, if you are a miniature painting hobbyist, getting a 3D printer is one of the best little presents you can get for yourself. Amen. Because you get access to thousands upon thousands of models that you can just pump out whenever you need them. A much bigger variety of subject matters than are available typically at your game store. And you can do things like scale them up, scale them down, turn one into a bust that wasn't meant to be a bust. Like you can do all sorts of fun things.
You can print 20 of them and practice painting as long as you have patience and time for it.
Right. If you're really bad at eyes and want to print eyes, you can print a strip of 40 heads and just sit there and just paint the eye over and over and over again. And you will get great at painting eyes if you paint 40 heads of eyes in a row.
Eventually you will get one you like.
Yeah, it's true. And because it's just resin, you don't care. It's also that you goofed up this whole model. Like hey, I completely screwed up this skeleton. If I was doing traditional minis, I'd have to like throw it in my ultrasonic cleaner or California Awesome bin, and then let strip the paint off of it, which isn't all that bad if you need to
If you have
restart a
to.
mini. But
Right,
for
right.
3D printed mini, just toss that thing in the trash. 4 hours later, I've got a new one.
Yeah, I remember probably a couple years ago when we were playing.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say is it Pathfinder D&D. I don't even remember at this point,
Mm-hmm.
but the player was playing a barbarian, and
Mm-hmm.
he got this because he had a rage power to grow when he would rage,
Right.
and so we actually got two minis. I think one of them was a privateer press ogre, and then there was a monk from Reaper that just kind of looked similar enough. And then with
Right.
the paint job, elevated it to do that. And that effect was so cool when you would rage and suddenly like boom, get all massive and everything. And it was so impactful and help people immerse, especially, because we have some people in our group that are aphantasic. Um, but now 3D printing, those sort of effects and shticks for your character, you have, the curse that turns you into a panda or whatever it is, you can do it. And you can
Right.
do it really, really well. And
Mm-hmm.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Also, hello to Alex Shever, who is joining us in chat. We appreciate seeing you again, Alex. You are always a joy to find. All right. And also, I have been painting miniatures for, like I said, for 20 years now. I love the hobby. I have never painted more miniatures in a year since I got my printer. My first year since getting the printer, I cranked out over 400 models fully painted. And the next year it was like 290 something, so not quite as many. And this year I'm already on track to exceed that one. And the reason is that there's just as many models as you need can just pop out that printer. So even if you're just wanting to practice or crank it, it doesn't matter how bad of a painter you think you are. If once you crank through 100 minis, which is just one bottle of resin, if you want it to be, you will
Right.
become a much better painter and confident. And also, I want to stress, you do not have to be an amazing painter to get these minis. When we're talking about playing games, it's that people talk about the tabletop standard. You don't need masterpieces on the table. It's just like maybe they just shouldn't be gray blobs, and
Yeah.
that helps. So just basic paint jobs, just get the colors blocked in, and your players and your fellow players, your game masters, they're just going to appreciate seeing it, and it's awesome. And we're talking about a 1 inch tall figure 3 feet away from you on a gaming table in bad
Absolutely.
light,
Yeah.
just getting it approximate. And I want to and people are paying like big money for like pre-painted miniatures and stuff, and you don't have to compete much. So I love Whiz Kids and their models, and I have thousands of their pre-painted models in my collection,
Ditto.
right?
I have
So
tons.
like the basic like the basic model paint job they have is like really flat basic blocked out colors. You could any miniature painter can learn to do this in a day class. It easily exceed this quality. In fact, I guarantee you that if you weren't to give it a try, and you can get into like a learn to paint class with somebody who actually cares, or you will follow some learn to paint guides that I'm going to shout out to later, you will paint like 10 times better than this by the end of your first paint session. Easy.
Not to mention, you're going to be able to do small things, and this is something you cannot, especially
Mm-hmm.
if you're dungeon master or game master. You can actually customize things. So, like for instance, there are psionic goblins that are blue. Like, so
Mm-hmm.
to actually just print some goblins and paint them as blue, and actually or to I'm big fan of sneaking in colors that allow me to differentiate the minis on the table so that I can track hit points or
Mm-hmm.
effects and little things like that. Like, sure, you can take your pre-paint minis and you can like put red dots on them. I think we've all done it, or
Mm-hmm.
numbers or whatever. But like, to me, again, if you like slather a number on the bottom of that thing, that's one step less in immersion, right? Like, where
Mm-hmm.
if it's just a subtle thing, like, okay, that guy has a purple flame, that guy has a green flame, like it's
Right.
suddenly easy to just differentiate those.
Right.
On my GM initiative track where I just write green flame, purple flame, or GF, PF, and
Mm-hmm.
like there it's all built into my paint scheme, and I have complete control of that when I 3D print stuff. Like customizing is so easy, and I just
Right.
I can't get enough of it. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah.
Go on.
And these aren't 3D printed models, but the new frameworks line that WizKids, we just talked about them, are putting out, they, for their multi-packs with their orcs and kobolds, they all have like an option for that. So they, with the kobolds, come with little bitty jars, and you can put different a number of jars or different colored jars on their bases to differentiate between the kobolds, and the orcs come with candles to do
Nice.
the same thing. And as 3D printing people, we can go find STLs of candles and skulls and really awesome bases and everything in the world to add those sorts of little fun details to our models, should we wish to do so. All right, so let's say you've never painted anything in the world. Where should you get started? Now, painting models is not a difficult thing. It should not be an intimidating thing. And it should be, honestly, it's, for me, it's a fun thing, especially to do with my friends. Me and you, Kristen, we hung out the other day in video chat and just cranked out a bunch of models, having fun with them, testing out the new Speedpaints, and you were testing out some other stuff we'll talk about. But getting started, you basically just need a set of acrylic paints. And if you have to, the apple barrel at 50 cents a bottle isn't the worst possible thing you could use to do it. I would recommend getting, go something from the hobby store like Vallejo or Citadel or any other basic paints, Army Painter, whatever's available. That's a little bit better. And there are some fantastic tutorials on getting started. But basically all you're doing is, thinning down acrylic paint, priming models ahead of time. So you will want to get a spray paint primer, get cheap brushes, paper towels, a cup, and some water. It's not expensive to get into it. And like if you all you have is your local Walmart feed and tack and and apple barrel paints, you can still get some nice looking models on the table. Everything is better than gray is basically the situation there. Even if you paint the model gray in the end, like I painted a bunch of skeletons that I'll be showing off, and they're very gray, but like everything's better than bare plastic. And that's all. And any effort at all is going to be appreciated. And you don't have, this isn't a competition. This isn't, don't worry about, showing it off to your friends. Everybody's just going to think it's great. There's a tutorial that is my favorite one to recommend for getting started. And that is Speed Painting the Blackstone Fortress by Midwinter Minis. And Blackstone Fortress was this board game that Games Workshop put out, which was like a 40K dungeon crawler. And it was really cool. It's, if you can get a hold of that game, it's a really fun game. But there's a whole bunch of models that came in it, like a bunch of other games. And so Midwinter Minis, they basically got their start showing like some really good tutorials on how to paint these models up, assuming you've never painted a model for the first time. And it is one of the absolute best tutorial series for learning to paint miniatures. I highly recommend going check it out. Also, Guy from Midwinter Minis is a really chill dude. Him and Penny on who do that show together, it's one of my favorite miniature painting shows, and it's just a real chill, fun time with some people who love the hobby. So you will definitely love getting into that. So if you've never painted anything for the first time, Speed Painting Blackstone Fortress by Midwinter Minis. It will teach you what is the traditional method for painting miniatures, including a list of the supplies that you should get to get started. And like $20 will take care of everything you need to get started. So it's not even an expensive hobby to get into.
Yeah, one thing I want to circle back on that too is I am always floored because I've been painting minis at least 20, 30 years. And I can go back and watch a day one tutorial even now and still see something. I'm just like, wow, how did I miss that? And like, everybody's going to have different ideas. Everybody's going to approach it differently. Sometimes even just the phrasing on the technique can be all it needs to click differently or better. You see tiny things, jumping into making your own washes, for instance, or like how to do things like that. Like, I look at a lot of tutorials from Goobertown, for instance. Not to mention, I can listen to that guy's voice and just like, the
Brent
piece
from Givertown
just
is like
washes.
he's called the Bob Ross of miniature painting for a reason.
Yeah,
And
absolutely,
it applies.
absolutely. But I would definitely check those out as well. I know he does a lot of like paint a box, or actually one of the things I think that he does, if you're an established painter or you've been hit a wall, he does random color schemes from like does a random mini with a random color and a random highlight. And you would think it's crazy, like, oh, I can't believe you're going to take this vintage, 40K model and paint it pink and green. But you see some of the coolest stuff come out of that. And like one of the things about 3D printing that's just so amazing when it comes to painting is that with that resin, dropping your cost down so little to get in, like I would get a 40K mini, I would save up for it and I would paint it and it would be bad. And I would just be depressed. I'd be crushed. And now it's like, okay, I print off another one, I mean, unless it's like a colossal mini that I spent like an hour putting together or whatever, it doesn't matter. And it's so freeing and liberating to play with those weird color schemes and things like that. We talk about Dana Howell a lot. I love, gradient priming. It's like a thing that I'm like super obsessed with, although I will actually talk it down a little bit later tonight. We'll talk about why when we get there, but like, just different techniques like that. And the cost of getting into it and experimenting is just so much friendlier now. And I love it. Anyway.
And also remember, this is just paint. When you're getting started into painting your miniatures and it goes wrong, like, yeah, we're talking about 3D printing. We're lucky we can just run off another one. You could like, I know I'm learning, I'm going to print 6 of the same dude and it's going to cost me like a nickel a piece or whatever. That's not a big deal. But even if you did have that $50 Alex James Workshop model, Alex in chat talking about their April Fool. I'll get to that, Alex. I have a fun I want to point at that. But getting to, if you got like the $50 or your Kingdom Death limited edition Kyra from Pathfinder crossover mini, like there's like 20 of these in the entire world, and you goof it, doesn't matter. This stuff comes off. You can like we call it LA Totally Awesome or Purple Power, or everybody has their own favorite chemical for this. Just make sure the chemical you use is an acetone on a plastic model, because that's how you get goo. But just like alcohol bath, or like I said, LA's Totally Awesome, that's an option. And you just toss it in that stuff for a week, come out with a toothbrush, that paint comes right off. You can start over again. And even tiny screw ups while you're painting, that doesn't matter. Just block it off. Paint covers paint. It's not a big deal. And even if you goof it entirely, the first couple of times you reprime a model from scratch, like you can just like, before you start even stripping paint, you can just take it outside and reprime it a couple of times before you start losing detail.
Sure. As long as your primer's not behaving poorly.
Yeah, Alex Shiver from or Shivler in chat. Speaking of James Workshop and April Fool's Day, G-Dubs double bluffed us. We're getting finally squats back after only 25 years, which is fun. If I don't know if you've seen this, but on April Fool's Day they released a trailer of some super soldier marching into what looked like an Imperial spaceship, and highly hinted that it was going to be squats. But haha, April Fool's Day. And then like the next day it's like, what, us joking? And it was like, nope, it wasn't an April Fool's joke after all. They're really re-releasing the squats, which are space dwarves. And they even showed off some models and they look really great.
Really cool. I was really, there was some foxy dwarves, but I have to say, I already had space dwarves because I started getting them on Patreon 2 or 3 years ago.
There's several good ones, and I'm trying to remember my favorites right now. Is it Kaisha no Neko? I can never pronounce his name correctly.
Yes, actually, I think I have a couple of those. I have the minor ones.
So my tribes, Kaiosha no Neko, who does a fantastic set of fantasy dwarves, also does a sci-fi series and part of that sci-fi series is some awesome sci-fi dwarves. So if you want to get a head start on your League of Volton. That's their new name for the new Space Dwarves. If you want your get a new Kickstart on your Space Dwarves, definitely Casino Neko. I will provide a link in the show notes because, good Lord, that is a hard one to spell from my random bad pronunciation of it. But they do some of the best dwarf models, period. They also do a lot of Japanese and Chinese and other Asian culture inspired models. And they also do fantastic space dwarfs. So go check them out if you want to get a head start on the Leagues of Volton.
And I want to say their membership isn't very much, is it? Like,
it's standard. It's $10.
Okay, like $10.
Yeah.
There was
So
another
I've
one.
been on and off with them for ages, and since the dwarf army is in the queue right now, I'm back on. They've been doing a bunch of really good cool dwarves right now. Their current set is a bunch of like the honor guard and also the big giant cannon dwarves with like just looking around, spear throwers and cannons and Gatling guns and a bunch of dwarves and helicopters, and like, yes,
always
we're gonna get our giant
helicopters.
dwarves. Yeah, Mecha dwarves. You gotta love your flying dwarves. They don't have any other kind of mount. They might as well have helicopters.
Give me fantasy dwarves with their big billy goats any day. That's where I'm at.
Or bears. I love me a dwarf when it's riding a bear. All right, so the traditional way of painting, which is just get normal acrylic paints, slap it down in layers, use a wash on it. That's the traditional like heavy metal style that has been developed in the hobby for years and years. But over the past little bit, there's actually been a new style of painting that I think is better for new people to get into the hobby because it produces results incredibly quickly that look fantastic with the minimum amount of effort put into it, minimum amount of time. And if you're 3D printing like, an encounter for next weekend and you need to get all those snake people ready to go in a hurry, this will get it done. Like I have been cranking out, for instance, to get started, and I'm talking about contrast paints and DIY washes or painting with washes or the new contender to the table, the one that we're really going to chat about a bunch, the new Army Painter Speed Paint line.
I guess I would call the style glazing, right? Really?
No, glazing is a specific style where you take incredibly thin down paint and then layer it on into a gradient. Yeah. Well, these are heavily transparent paints that are closer to inks but a little bit thicker. I think I've heard them best described as stains. They stain a model.
I can see that.
So they heavily pigmented. So the color yellow paint will be yellow on the model, but it goes into the recesses. And that's
say that word again.
Yellow.
Yellow.
Yeah.
Yellow. Okay.
Yeah. So, but it runs into the recesses and that'll be darker, and the higher up edges, it'll pull away from a little bit, and those will automatically give you highlights. So just one coat of this paint onto your model and you've done your base coating, your shading, and a little bit of your highlight work all in one go. And it is so satisfying. And there's several options available. Like this recently got its popularity when Games Workshop Citadel Paints released the contrast line, which I bought the whole contrast line. I loved it. And before I even got those, right when they came out, Goobertown did a video that they were planning on doing about painting with washes, which was making these really heavy washes. A wonderful video all on its own to just understanding how paint works, because he talks about how all the different paints are made and all the different ingredients. And
he's
in the end,
PhD chemist, so he knows
the dude knows his stuff and he knows how to make paint. And in the end, he gives this really great recipe using artist inks, just basic matte acrylic medium that you can get from any art supply or hobby store, and dish soap, and you can make your own quote unquote contrast type paint. And I've been using that for probably the last 3 years, and I
believe we call
style.
that flow enhancer when we're using it for paint. not dish
It's
soap.
a surfactant.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a flow improver. If you can get airbrush flow improver, it's actually better than the dishwash soap for this. But
Unless you accidentally get the one for alcohol-based stuff or whatever, and then clog up your airbrush with it.
So I just got a little bit of my soap, and I keep it in this little dropper bottle. And when I make up a new batch of paint, I have this on hand. I use this constant.
Yeah.
I love it.
I think I learned that actually Black Magic Craft for doing dungeon washes was the first time I ever used dish soap. I was like, really? But it works really well.
Yeah. Well, it's a surfactant. Dish soap serves as a surfactant, and what it does is it breaks the surface tension of your paint and lets it flow better. There is dedicated paint flow improver that will do this for you, but if that's a hobby item that even my local art store doesn't have any in stock. I'd have to order it online. I probably should have in the past 3 years. I've been experimenting with making my own paint. Fun fact: when I was talking with the crew that makes Reaper paints, the Reaper branded paints, they were talking about they put that in their paints, an extra amount of that on purpose by default. So if there's a reason that when you paint with Reaper paints, people say they're pre-thinned or this paint's real thin, it's some of it is that the paint is a bit thinner in the bottle, but a lot of it is that they actually put extra flow improver compared to other brands in their paint. And so it flows so much smoother that people think it's thinner by default, even though it's not any thinner. It just doesn't have as much surface tension, so it flows easier.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Reaper paint has this built into it by default. And there's even another method. If you like the idea, but you only have access to normal acrylic paint, this is a Midwinter Minis recipe. But if you take there's a recipe. I'll put the video for this one in chat. But if you take 50% water, 50% matte medium, and a couple of drops of that of your flow improver or dishwashing liquid, which is what I used, and you mix that up into a bottle, and use this instead of water to thin your paints, this will make any paint behave contrasty.
Yeah. I did see that one. That video. I want to say Goops did one too, but anyway.
It's fantastic. So there's ways to get to this method. So if you've got a whole bunch of Citadel paints and you don't want to go buy a whole bunch of contrast paints, go watch that video on how to go watch that video for the Midwinter mixing medium, and that'll do it. Definitely watch the Goobs video on how to make your own. And he made some of that stuff just using craft paint without even getting artist inks. So and if you're interested in getting contrast paints, or the ones I'm actually going to recommend over contrast paints, which is the new Army Painter Speed Paint line, then that is another way. So these are transparent paints that go over your models. They darken, they shade the recesses, they brighten the highlights, and they just make a model look great. And I like using them over zenithal primed minis. So I've talked about zenithal priming in the episodes in the past. So this just means you take your mini, you prime it a dark color, usually black, and then you come in with an airbrush or just another rattle can of, like, just getting a white spray can and a black spray can will do this for you. Prime it black, take the white spray paint from above, prime it just from above with the white spray paint. You will get a natural gradient coming down the model, and that with contrast paint where it's transparent, that natural gradient shows through the contrast paint and makes it look like you did so much more work than you really did painting these models.
Absolutely.
And I did that for this new batch of skeletons that I painted just for this episode to talk about it. And I cranked out 20 of these Artisan Guilds 3D printed skeletons using that method of just contrast paint over zenithal prime. And I think they look great, in my opinion. Like for a speed paint job,
those are amazing.
Yeah, these are all done with Army Painter Speed Paints. And the reason I did this is there was a lot of videos on Army Painter Speed Paints right now where they're like, well, I want to give it a challenge, so we're going to paint a Space Marine with it, something with lots of flat curved panels. Spoiler, they work great over flat curved panels. They don't do the blotchiness that the contrast paints end up doing, and you actually do get a smooth surface over those panels, which is great. But I was like, I'm going to use the tool for what it's good at, which is going to be Arian says not seeing any minis. Huh? Do you see?
I see them. Yeah, I'm not
Okay, yeah.
sure.
So
Maybe
Alex, let me know in chat if you're not seeing the minis right now on the
well, he's
screen. Like
on.
they have to be if you are.
Yeah, I would think.
Yeah. So I threw those paint. I lost my train of thought. So I wanted to paint something that they would be good at, because when I reach for a hammer, I don't need a screwdriver.
Right.
So these are really great for fur and textures and zombies and skeletons. So I'm like, I'm going to print out a whole bunch of skeletons from Artisan Guilds and speed paint them with the Army Painter speed paints. And I really think they look great. The speed paints, especially, they do the thing that the contrast paint style does. It goes just getting an orange background. Huh. This is so weird, y'all.
Because Aaron now says he sees them. So
okay, y'all. So sorry about that.
Maybe Restream is working strangely.
Very strange.
Flashes.
Huh.
Maybe reshare it. Can you do that? Reshare it?
I'll do that in a moment for sure. But anyway, I threw the paints on the models, and they did a great job. They pulled into the recesses and darkened them up just like contrast. But unlike contrast, it pulled away from the highlights. So if you look at some of the edges of some of the swords or some of the axes on these minis, when you look at them, you'll actually see like white strikes going along the edges, or especially on those like army pounders on the channel.
Edge highlighted.
Right.
And that on the armor that I did too. And
yeah, and I don't have time to edge highlight no armor. If
not
I'm
on
doing
20
speed
skeletons,
paint work.
you don't. No.
No. And not especially these. They've got like all sorts of scraps of leather with divots on them, and it works really well. It pulls that trick off, and they go on so much fast with these paints. They're already a very thin consistency, so they go straight onto your brush and then straight down to them. It goes straight onto the MIDI and all in one nice coat, and it comes off of that brush real easy like.
Yeah.
And with some paints, they kind of get a little bit gooey or a little bit jelly, and you have to learn to thin them down a bit to get that cool flow state going out of them, but not too flow. But these are just like the perfect consistency right out of the bottle. And each of those skeletons was 5 minutes of painting. Just like I sit there and timed it again and again and again. Every 5 minutes a skeleton. Every 5 minutes a skeleton. Now, I did do one last trick because I do this for my entire army, and I only did this so that they would blend in with my undead army, which is I took a dry brush of ghostly green across the bottom of them to give them that glow. In fact, that's the only non-contrast work on those models besides black paint around the base rim, because you want a nice solid color for your base rims.
Yeah.
So as a tool in the toolbox, it is an exceptional tool. I think it does an amazing job there. And I'm super happy with them. I ended up getting the mega set, and it was I highly recommend the investment in that mega set. The starter set, which is $50, is that right?
I actually think I got mine for like
$45, comes with 12 paints, and they're good paints, but there's a few that I wish that had in that starter set. And the mega set is $100, and it gives you 24 paints plus the mixing medium. In both sets, you get one of their really good
it's
paint
a very
brushes.
nice brush.
It's the monster size, but it's actually the right size you want to use for this job.
It is. It's almost exactly what you need. I do agree with you on the starter set, because that's all I've been able to get so far, although I have been looking for it. So it tells you how I feel that I've been looking for the mega set. And I'm going to go through an LGS because if I'm going to pay full price or close to it, I'm going to get it locally. But the warm range, the flesh tone, yellow, orange, red, brown, was very tight. Like it was a very narrow, like you could have taken one of those tones out probably and put in something a little weirder, I imagine, or a little more diversity in it. But like it's still very cool for like working, through that range. But I was a little surprised that both orange, red, orange, and yellow all kind of came in there.
Yeah. You sent me
Uh,
some pictures of these models. These are those chaosy Dark Knights from Broken Anvil?
Broken Anvil, yeah, they've done like a Heaven and Hell like fighting set, and they're just they're very chaosy. I even put them on Duncan Shadow's little chaos bases, just
Mhm.
kind of tie them together. But yeah, again, just like you said with yours, this is almost entirely single coat. It is like a lot of the bone edges you can see got pulled out just by the natural action of the moving on the bone tone contrast. uh, Made it super easy because they have a lot of bone on them. If you're painting them like they're actual skeletons. It is interesting though because I've been going to local hobby shops and talking to people about it so much. I've seen some very it's a divisive thing, right? And of course, what isn't nowadays? But it is divisive, I think, because of the way people are treating them. And I think you hit it on the head with these. For me, to ultimately use the speed paints correctly, you're going to want to start with that zenithal prime
Mhm.
and create the contrast as much as you can beforehand, and then its natural pooling action is going to pull out detail and everything, and you're going to get your shading and your variation. The people who I found both like on Reddit or on some of the local hobby stores are using the speed paint like it's a normal base coat.
Okay.
And so they're doing a flat, black or flat white prime, which a flat black prime, by the way, you're
It's the
gonna have
worst option.
a bad time. I
Yeah.
could see doing a flat white prime if you really had to.
Mhm.
And then the other thing about it is they're starting with the really saturated tones. The orc skin speed paint is
Mhm.
phenomenally, the saturation on it's amazing.
Right.
But it's also one of the least contrasty because of that, right? Like,
Mhm.
so like it will, I don't know if I can show this snake. These scales are probably not gonna show my little camera, but it's one of the least where you compare it to the yellow on our belly. I cannot do things backwards in cameras. Um, Again, single coat, and it's so samey that a lot of people like see it on a mini and go, "Oh, it's just my green base coat. It's just my great base coat." So I'm gonna paint it my orc, and then I'm gonna do my highlighting, and I'm gonna blend and whatever. And these people talk about it activating, and apparently, particularly if you're using like a normal solid acrylic tone, it will cause some of them to like lift back up and mix into the tone. And so a lot of people are doing this green base coat or whatever, and then they're painting like the teeth of the orc, they're picking them out on top of it, and the teeth are turning green. And like I would not recommend that technique with this anyway, because I would have done your zenithal and then just kind of, you don't have to be like super controlled, but just a little controlled application, get to the right place, and then it flows and does the rest. Again, that big chonky brush has a nice point on it, but it's more about just taking that kind of little bit of a
Mhm.
well up. You use it straight out of the bottle,
Mhm.
and actually I found it's actually kind of surly to thin down with water. You don't want to do
Right. You
that with
don't
it.
use water. Use the medium. You have to use the mixing medium to thin it.
Yeah, because it will do weird things. And it blends really well. But again, don't try to thin it down, because I was like, I'm gonna make a like a magenta skin tone for these kind of like tiefling
Right.
devil born looking guys. And oof, that was a bad scene when that water hit it. It just became so segmented and
Mhm.
dissolved.
But it does mix with itself very well, and
Yes.
that the fact that it does have a longer working time now, if you let it dry for like 8 hours, that work and then come back later, that it doesn't reactivate as easily. It will if you put more contrast paint on it, but after like a day, it won't even do that. But normal paint is usually pretty safe even after just a few minutes of letting it dry. But if you want to take advantage of that, this is a wonderful paint for getting gradients and blends on purpose. Like me and you, when they're in the paint session, we practiced
Yep.
that on this extra skeleton I had laying around. And so we got this like blue to green to yellow gradient all across this skeleton, just by using the paints together. And it's like, if I wanted to do that blend on purpose using normal wet blending techniques, it would have taken me hours. But it was literally just slap, slap,
Slap
wiggle,
slap.
wiggle,
Yep.
done.
Yeah, yeah. I've started kind of playing with that on some flame effects, but the minis are a little little more complicated, so it's going to take a second to get them done. But yeah, it's still really, really fast.
Right. Use it, take advantage of that property. It also does mean that if you are like going back, I did this a lot with the skeletons where I would find that, like, oh, I missed a spot or the paint pulled away a little bit too far from this edge, but I don't have the color I used on the brush. Well, with the brown to gray to blacks that I was using intentionally neutral where it was close, I just like whatever I happen to have that's gray armor, but I've got brown on my brush, dab. Now it's a dirty spot on the armor that blended together perfectly across that skeleton without any, and just looked like I did it on purpose. And that
Right.
made those skeletons look better that way.
Yeah. The only colors that seemed a little strong for me were like working a cool into a warm. I got a little bit like, so blue into brown or red. That there was a little bit of like unless I was doing it like really fast, I found that they could set just enough that it wouldn't blend as smoothly.
Right.
But yeah, otherwise they just sing together.
Right. And darker colors usually will dominate the lighter colors. If you like that, dark wood is a great cleanup color because like it goes over that belt no matter what was under that belt.
I will say the same of the gray. That gray is going to be a magic fixing shader for the rest of my life.
Wait till you get the black. It's even better for that.
Nice.
Oh, yeah. And it's also great. These paints are really great for like the little fiddly bits and details across belts and boots and hips and stuff that you don't want to bother painting the individual bits on.
Yeah.
Just slap it on there, be done with it. It's like we were both talking about watching Ninjon's new video where he was talking about his speed painting methods, and don't paint the boots was one of his mottos, and it's such a great one. He's just like, just slap the most basic colors down on things at the bottoms and out the way of the mini, because the parts of the mini that you want to put some attention on and try to do cool stuff is heads, faces, shoulders, and weapons and capes.
Yeah. And it's the same stuff that you're going to hit with your zenithal highlight,
Right.
You make that stuff the bright thing, draw the eye to it, and you don't really have to invest in 14 bootstraps unless you really want to.
Right. I also find that this is a great starting point for any mini, even if I'm going to go back and give it the like 11 out of 10 effort to make it awesome. The contrast method is a great starting point. So you can get, the basic, like, the base coating of a model is if you ask most miniature painters, their least favorite part of miniature painting, base coating is that thing that they dislike. And this makes base coating fast and fun and easy, and it's done. And then you can come back and get super into like the highlighting, blending stages, and then you can paint them boots if you want to. You can come back and make those boots sparkle if you want to. But this just gets you started. And it is so much easier than 3 layers of normal traditional mini painting to get yourself to that very basic base coat plus Nuln Oil across it step.
Yeah, you were posting on like I think Instagram or maybe Twitter about like what do you do about a batch painting burnout?
Right.
And like I noticed when I was working with it, like that I would go across and hit that armor plate, and all those details would suddenly kind of populate, like just flow across it, and it was just so like delightful that for the first time in I don't know how long, batch painting was actually kind of cool, because like I was comparing the differences on the filigree of different armors because it was so fast to pick it out, and I didn't have to like suffer, like I wasn't going back and having to dry brush and highlight and ink and do 20 things. It just came up. And it was also fun because I was comparing 2 things, right? Like
and like and if I am happy with these results, like I am very happy with what we pulled out on the other side, both your Chaos Knights, and I threw up the skeletons hoping that people can see them this time. Are they going to win the Golden Demon? No. Are they going to look absolutely awesome on my tabletop when they're swarming my players in a dungeon? Yes. Yes, they are.
Well, yeah, and you don't want to put a Golden Demon quality painted thing on your table anyway. Like, that's the thing that just kills me, is when people beat themselves up about it. You want something that is good and it evokes, and then that's it. You don't want to like any more investment. I don't know about you. I have cats. Cats jump on gaming tables and they destroy things, and I don't want my golden demon quality, not that I'll ever paint a golden demon quality one, but I want my cat to like land on my, Lord of Change and shatter it into 50 pieces. That's not an experience I would enjoy. But like this is perfect for that kind of table ready, go to, get it done. And like I said, it was really freeing and joyful, which I know I could use a lot more of joyful things in my life right now. Anyway,
so comparing the different options for this style of painting, I definitely did recommend watching the Goobertown video, because that homemade Goobertown wash version of these and the Army Painter speed paints behave incredibly similar to each other. I wonder if I could take some of my Goobertown wash medium, that midwinter medium, which is basically the same stuff, and use it to thin these paints down just fine. Like I could. I'll do that experiment soon. Like just water. I know it doesn't work. The normal medium, and then some mixing medium or thinning medium, and see how that works out. But because those two paints work incredibly similar to these, and I think that and also if you're doing it yourself, you can make any color you want, and it's super cheap that way too. But these are super cheap on their own. It's only $4.50 a bottle if you're buying them individually, which is just 50 cents more than miniature paint normally cost, as opposed to contrast, which contrast is good paint. I love contrast paint. It's not as good as the Army Painter paint. I don't think it gets blotchy, but it's definitely thicker, and some of the colors are a little bit darker, more vibrant. And the contrast paints are an option, but they're $8 a bottle, or $7.80 a bottle instead of. So that full set of 36 paints of contrast paint will run you $300.
Yep. Yeah, I don't even think I'm halfway through it, and I probably won't be at this point.
Yeah. So
there are other affordable options. Like I did during my painting, I experimented with Green Stuff World Intensity Ink, because the local game store, one of the stores, they were talking about how it was very similar to the speed paint. And in my experience, that's not exactly accurate. I don't know if you want to show the difference, but I painted up half the Chaos Warriors I did with the Intensity Ink, and it's very comparable, actually, to me, to, I don't know if you've ever used Secret Weapon inks. Very similar to that.
You've got access to all sorts of cool painting goodies. I don't. I've got 2 game stores near me. That's more than I've ever should have. And I'm lucky that one of them stocks Army Painter, the other one stocks Citadel, and those are my options. The hobby store stocks Vallejo, and that's great. But my favorite paint ever is, for traditional miniature paint, is Pro Acryl, and I put all my. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Go.
No, it's fine. I've got, since you're bringing it up, I think there's 4 or 5 hobby stores within 10 blocks of each other here that all stock at least 3 lines of paint. So like, it's crazy. Maybe 10, not 10 blocks, but definitely 20. Like that have Pro Acryl, Vallejo, Army Painter, GW, and they'll usually have at least 2 or 3 of those. Crazy like. Anyway, but I did find that the Intensity, because I was specifically asked to compare it, it's much more bright and cartoony. It is coverage wise. I don't think the pigment's quite as dense. So there's reasons to use it. I think we talked about this early on, where I like that the speed paint is 1 coat effective.
Right.
Really early on when we were talking about inks, I think you said, well, it's not unusual to have to do 3 or 4 coats. And I was like, like the idea of like spending that much time just trying to get something to turn, a darker shade of green was insane to me. And I would say that the Intensity inks, despite their name, are much more what I would expect from an ink. You're going to probably hit it 2 or 3 times. I think the red, to get the red to be the same hue as 1 coat of the speed paint red, took about 3 passes. And it's effective. It looks as good. It's much brighter, but like time wise, it definitely slowed me down. Like you were mentioning 5 minutes a model. I was probably about 20
Wow.
With the green stuff. But still,
Yeah.
I mean, 20 minutes to knock out a table ready mini is not a lot, especially
No.
when we're printing these trays and trays of stuff. You spend a couple of nights and you've got this massive play army ready to go. So
Right.
I was happy with the green stuff, but I would still definitely fault over to speed paint for sure, and I'm
Right.
still tracking down that big set
The more you
because
describe how the intensity inks behave, it sounds like it behaves like ink, like good
exactly,
ink.
right. And I was really kind of surprised how like there's almost like this weird and anything new, right? Everybody's like,
Hmm.
oh, there was a lot of resistance, when they're talking
Hmm.
about that game store. The other game store, I had a lot of contrast fans, and don't get me wrong, I love contrast paint,
Right.
particularly
Hmm.
I like gradient priming,
Hmm.
right? You can get some really cool, weird color shift results, which contrast paint is really good to go over that, right? And it will pull that tone and kind of blend it
Hmm.
and actually smooth out a lot of the gradient, especially if you get
Right.
something choppy.
Hmm.
Um, I will be frank, the speed paint did not do it as well, which is probably fine because speed paint you should do a two-tone zenithal highlight and be done, right? Like you don't want to
Hmm.
necessarily go crazy. You just want it fast and fun, and it's better with just that simple start.
Hmm.
I would say the minis that I did that way were much clearer, and the color blending worked better. The
Hmm.
not blending, the highlighting, the way that it pooled and everything. Where like that's why I would still use a contrast paint, right? But
Hmm.
you've talked about working time. The working time on contrast paints feels very short to me.
Hmm.
And then back and it does not. You cannot blend it
Right.
later. You can't do much to it later. Where I found
Which is
that this
still longer than traditional paint. Like normal acrylic paints is dry in seconds. Contrast paint give it 30 seconds.
sure, but then you get that kind of pooling weirdness if you go too long. Where I think the speed paint felt really good to go back into if I
Yeah.
had to.
Yeah. And the
Nice.
Goobertown wash is like that too. You really need to give it a few minutes to dry.
Yeah.
Ooh. Well, we are coming up on time now. Is anything what let's do our theme, our shout outs to great places to learn about mini painting. Like what are our favorite miniature painting YouTubers out there?
Well, I will once again say Dana Howell, just
Yeah,
because I think
absolutely.
I think her videos push a lot of boundaries, do a lot of different things,
Mhm.
and create very unique looks. Like that
Mhm.
Bowser Gene Stealers, I think, where they're all
Mhm.
magma looking, was super
Yeah.
cool. And so I'd say for inspiration, that's a great channel. Um,
And that was she gave me the inspiration to do the ghostly green gradient on the underside of my undead.
and just as it's such a simple unifying effect, but your whole
Mhm.
army, like every time you add something to it, I'm like, that just fits, just
Mhm.
fits. Yeah.
Yeah.
How about you?
I'm oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I said what channels would you recommend or
So, but we've recommended Dana, we recommended Midwinter Minis, we've recommended Goober Town for sure.
Mhm.
I definitely want to say Ninjon is another fantastic channel, and
Absolutely.
as Miniac is
Mhm.
another one. Scott's channel, they work together as a pair. Those are fantastic. And Artist Opus is a fantastic for a completely different way of mini painting than we talked about. Artist Opus is about using only dry brushing, using makeup brushes to paint models, and it is amazing the quality and speed at which they are able to just pump out like they would their minis look competition ready to compete. They are bringing it to competitions with those models where they're just using dry brushing, which is a technique where you take a very soft bristled brush, put paint on it, get most of the paint off of it, and then run it lightly across the surfaces of a model so that the raised areas collect the paint stronger than the lowered areas, and they'll let you get like a dark to light gradient across a model that way real easy.
Yeah, I've seen some terrain work that they did on that channel that was really impressive
Right.
just with dry brushing.
Yeah.
Super cool.
Yeah. Dry brushing is a wonderful technique to learn for terrain, highlighting miniatures. A thing that I will often do, and when paired with contrast painting or speed paints painting is to do a dry brush after the fact of a paint over top of the work you already did. Like I like to take like as a nod to Dana Howe, I'll take pale sand or an ivory and just do it all over dry brush of the model after you've done painted it with the speed paints as a base coat, and it will pop and look glorious. And you spent like no time, 0 time on that model. Like from print to from the primer drying to done with it for the tabletop is like 6 minutes and you are done.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of those pale sand ones just click, just done. A little bit. I think we're out of time.
We are. All right, everyone. If you want to find out more about this show, you can find us over at printyourgames.com. And if you want to help the show out, go ahead and give us a review on iTunes or Spotify or wherever you saw this episode. If you happen to catch us over on YouTube or Twitter or Facebook, give us a like. Throw us a comment. It does help us spread the word, and share the episode, share the show if you like it. Help us find more people. Alex Schiffer has the final content. Any love for GW style edge highlighting? It looks great on Space Marines.
I like energy weapons doing edge highlighting. You can do some really cool stuff with that for sure.
Yeah. It's a technique that is fun, and it's a little bit on the tedious end, but it gives a really striking look. Great for panels, things like Space Marines, Gundams, tanks, any blades of any sort. Putting an edge highlight across a blade makes it look wonderful.
Yeah, I think Goober Town actually has some really good ones on edge highlighting specifically.
All right, we are out of time, everybody. We will talk to you all later.
Don't forget
Bye now.
Screen protector.
Yes.